Hello there folks, my name is Spoonks and welcome back to another episode of Box Office Chat. This is the show where I break down the top 5 domestic box office results, see where each movie landed, and see how well each movie did. So let's get started. Number 5 was Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, making $6.6 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $158 million and a worldwide total of $334 million worldwide. So this movie continues to disappoint overall. It has surpassed the $150 million milestone domestically, and I think it's got enough to crack $350 million worldwide maybe. It doesn't seem to be like plummeting or facing steep drops by any means necessary, but this is still a very disappointing turnout due to the ridiculously high budget of around $325 million. Apparently, this is not a good place to be because even though it has surpassed its initial budget, it still needs to double that, and unfortunately, it doesn't seem likely. There was just no interest, no hype for this movie at all. Word of mouth was not good, and this is certainly one of the biggest disappointments and biggest flops of the year, sadly. So yeah, unfortunately, Indiana Jones may very well leave the top 5 as a pretty big disappointment. Certainly one of the biggest flops of the year, sadly. Number 4 was Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, making $19.3 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $118 million and a worldwide total of $370 million. So unfortunately, this film had a very steep drop this weekend, falling over 65% in its second weekend. That is just not what you wanted to see for this movie, especially coming off the huge success of Top Gun Maverick and how usually these movies are very backloaded. They have very strong legs that carry them throughout the rest of the summer, especially Fallout, but unfortunately this was just not the case here. I just think this was a bad release date, putting it the week before the very stiff competition this weekend had, and that really hurt this movie, hurt the hype it had. Maybe it can pull off a Transformers after like a second weekend where you really have a devastating drop off, but then you pick yourself back up. I mean, it is possible. The summer movie season is winding down, so we'll see if that can happen. And it's not like the movie isn't heading in the right direction or anything. It's about to cross the $400 million milestone worldwide, which is pretty impressive. The downside here, though, is that the film is ridiculously expensive, $291 million budget. While it's in a better position than Indiana Jones, this is still a rather disappointing turnout. I'm sure they were hoping for a much bigger response than what they got here. Again, hopefully things can pick up the pace, as word of mouth and response from audiences was very positive initially. It just doesn't seem like it was carried out this weekend. So unfortunately, this is a pretty disappointing weekend for Mission Impossible. Again, hopefully it can pick itself back up, but yeah, things are not looking great for it, sadly. Number 3 was Sound of Freedom, making $19.8 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $124 million, and that total stays the same worldwide as it hasn't been released in any international countries yet. Sound of Freedom, despite the stiff competition, still holding very well for itself. Apparently, this is very solid counter-programming, I guess. A lot of people are still turning out to see this movie, even with the Pay It Forward program revealing that certain theaters are selling out, but no one is in those theaters. Very interesting things. But otherwise, yeah, this movie is still doing very well for itself. It's made all the money it needs to on a $14 million budget. It should surpass $150 million domestically very soon. It's not like this movie is headed into trouble or anything. It's actually made all the money it needs to, like I said. And yeah, it continues to just do very well. So well, as a matter of fact, that I am running out of positive things to say about it. It's probably going to crack a couple more milestones. It's probably going to continue to hold well, given that summer movie season is winding down, so much less competition for itself. But yeah, otherwise still a pretty surprisingly decent hit for Sound of Freedom. Number 2 was Oppenheimer, opening with $82 million this weekend domestically and $180 million worldwide. This is the fifth biggest opening weekend of the summer, topping Fast X and Transformers Rise of the Beast, but it still sits behind The Little Mermaid, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and another movie we will get to momentarily. It is Christopher Nolan's third biggest opening weekend of all time, behind The Dark Knight Rises and The Dark Knight, but topping Inception and Dunkirk. And it is also the biggest opening weekend for an R-rated movie this year, topping John Wick Chapter 4, Evil Dead Rise, Cocaine Bear, and No Hard Feelings. So I had high expectations for this movie. I thought it was going to really exceed expectations, but even I was surprised by how huge this movie opened to. The fact that it broke so many records, the fact that it pretty much cracked the $80 million milestone in 3 days was something I was not expecting it to do. I knew it was going to be successful, but not this successful, because there were those factors that everyone was talking about that might hurt it. The fact that it isn't the typical summer movie you would expect. It's not fun. There's not a lot of big special effects, not very funny, certainly. It's a drama where a lot of it is just most people talking in a room, and it's also 3 hours long, so there was that hurting it. But the fact, once again, it opened this well. I mean, it's just $20 million from surpassing $200 million worldwide. That is insane, as well as $20 million from surpassing the $100 million milestone worldwide. I didn't expect this movie to get to these points this quickly. It really shows that the buzz and the interest was a lot bigger than I think many people expected it to, and with the great response from audiences, it getting an A cinema score rating, I think this movie's gonna leg out. It's definitely gonna stand out for sure amongst all the other big summer movies. But yeah, I think we're going to see a very strong run here. It's certainly a much-needed win for Universal after the disappointments that were Fast X and especially Ruby Gillman. And that's another thing. Imagine telling yourself that this would open bigger than Fast X like 5 months ago. Absolutely insane. Yeah, overall, this is a great opening weekend. Great start. I'm so curious to see where this movie is going to go, but I have high hopes that it's going to leg out and be one hell of a decent summer surprise for sure. Just job well done. And finally, let's end the video off with the number one movie of the weekend, which was Barbie, opening with $162 million this weekend domestically and $356 million worldwide. This is the biggest opening weekend of the summer, topping Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, The Little Mermaid, and Oppenheimer. It's the biggest opening weekend of the year, topping the Super Mario Bros. Movie, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. And it is the biggest opening weekend for a movie directed by a female director, topping Captain Marvel, Frozen 2, Wonder Woman, and 50 Shades of Grey. Like Oppenheimer, I had big expectations. Hell, I had bigger expectations for this movie than Oppenheimer. I just saw all of the factors working for this movie, but even I could not expect how big of a phenomenon this movie would be. Like, the fact that it topped Mario, of all things, is extremely surprising, even with Mario opening on a Wednesday as opposed to the typical Friday release. This is still insane. Hard to believe that it got over that number. Absolutely phenomenal performance. The marketing was excellent. The buzz was super strong, and everyone loves, or at least knows, Barbie. And while yes, this is a big blockbuster, it is not as expensive as a lot of the other blockbusters this summer, as this movie only costed $145 million. Hard to believe, I know, and given where it's at worldwide and domestically, it's definitely made its money back. So yeah, this movie is already in the green. It's already been in the right direction, and it's going to continue going in the right direction as word of mouth and audience reception has been very positive, as this movie, like Oppenheimer, surprisingly got an A on cinema score rating, which was again another big surprise this weekend. The fact that both movies got A cinema score ratings, this was just a great weekend overall. And just a phenomenal weekend. Definitely a much needed win for Warner Brothers as well. It has been a terrible couple of months, well, couple of years for them, as this is their first major win since Elvis from last summer. Yes, they also had Evil Dead Rise, which did very well for itself, but I'm talking about like $100 million movie. Their last one was in fact Elvis, and this is certainly going to make up for all of those losses. I think the word of mouth is going to be very strong with this movie, given that this is, again, such a huge phenomenon right now. Several reports of so many people wearing pink at movie theaters and doing the Barbenheimer thing. I really think this movie is going to carry out for the rest of the summer. It's certainly going to become the biggest movie of the summer. It seems highly unlikely that it won't, unless something absolutely terrible happens, which I find hard to believe. And yeah, overall, this is a great opening for Barbie. I cannot see where this movie heads. It's looking like it's going to continue heading in the right direction, and I look forward to seeing it go there. So yes, overall, fantastic opening for Barbie, and it looks like it's going to be a fantastic run at the box office for Barbie as well. And those were your top 5 domestic box office results for this weekend, but we're not quite done yet, as we've got another week ahead of us and new movies hitting theaters. And this weekend we have one new major wide release, that film being The Haunted Mansion. This is the second adaptation of the beloved Disney attraction at the various Disney parks, second to, of course, the Eddie Murphy one back in 2003. Now, I know The Haunted Mansion is beloved. It's even many people's favorite attraction at the Disney parks, and I'm sure the name alone will get people interested. I also think the marketing for this movie has been a bit better than expected. I've gotten a couple ads for it here and there, and some pretty inventive tie-in promos. They did one with Zillow and State Farm I've been seeing a lot recently, and those commercials were admittedly pretty funny. But the downside here is the buzz is just not there. Again, this is based off of the Haunted Mansion, one of the most beloved attractions at the Disney parks. Like I said already, some people's favorite ride at Disney parks, and yet there has been very little discussions I'm hearing about it. I don't know too many people who are talking about this movie or even know it's coming out. I also think that this is just like Mission Impossible, a bad release date. Barbenheimer is still infectious. It's still in the air, and the hype is still there. And I think this movie is definitely going to get overshadowed by that. There's a chance it might, exceed expectations. Maybe those Barbenheimer screenings get sold out and they have no other choice but to see this movie. So maybe solid counter programming there. But I don't know. I don't think this is going to be a huge blockbuster given the name recognition, unfortunately. So while I don't think it's going to do bad, I'm not expecting great things for it either. But we'll see how well this movie truly does, as well as the rest of the movies that land in the top 5 on the next Box Office Chat. And that's going to do it for this week's episode of Box Office Chat. What did you all think of the results? Were you satisfied? Unsatisfied? Comment down below and let me know. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you like this channel, hit the subscribe button. Follow me on all the social media links right there. And until next time, everyone, stay sharp.